Love is the law, love under will. Hi, I'm Sibling James Gordon for the Thelemic Order. Over the next few weeks, as we move through the Thelemic Holy Season, I'm going to be talking about the upcoming Thelemic Initiations. Now, I've made some comments at the end of our readings, but today I just want to talk a little about the Magical Revival and the Thelemic Initiations. One thing I'll be very upfront about is that this is not the sort of initiation that is about saying a lot of very generic things and playing some drums. Thelema, as we've practiced it, as Crowley handed it down, is a ceremonial magic tradition. And that doesn't mean there can't be other traditions that have a Thelemic core, and I'd love to see some other options, but ceremonial magic is the one we've been handed, and it's the one we're initiating in. A lot has changed about ceremonial magic, and magic in general, since I got involved back in the 1980s. Back then, getting even some of the more commonly available magical texts was quite hard. My first copy of the Goetia was the amazingly obscure 1979 typescript and facsimile Nelson and Anne White edition, which was exclusively based on the British Museum's Sloane manuscript 2731. This was not because I was a collector of oddities, but because that was literally the only edition I could get through the only available esoteric bookstore. I lived in a fairly big city. Now, I think that's a good example. I don't need the White edition now because I can literally Google Sloane manuscript 2731 and see the manuscript itself. I can compare it with Sloane 3825. I can compare Mathers and Crowley's version, Waite's version, or Idris Shaw's version. I can pick up this amazing little edition by Colin Campbell of the Art Goetia and see how the individual spirits relate to the Pseudo-Monarchia Daemonium. And it's not just Goetia. Any grimoire, the Great Magical Papyri, everything is at my fingertips. Now, the term Grimoire Revival has been broadly used online, but it's also agreed that it's a little too narrow to encompass the entire phenomenon of what's happened in the last 20 years. Today, I'm not struggling for information, I'm awash in it, because there's been an explosion of interest in European and Near Eastern traditional magic, as the digital era has meant that texts that were once hidden to anyone but experts, who were often simply people with time on their hands and an interest in the occult, these manuscripts previously weren't widely available, now they are. This not only means that nearly anyone can get hold of any historic text, but the people who have actual qualifications to comment or translate them are able to do so without spending most of their time just struggling to find the source. This has led to a vast revival, and in a lot of cases, Thelema has been the odd man out. If your model of Thelema is that it starts with Crowley in 1904, then this massive revival of tradition doesn't have much to do with you. Now, I think there's two things we explore in the Thelemic Initiations. First, Thelema has rich, deep roots in European and Near Eastern tradition. It has extensive roots in Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, Neo-Gnosticism, Neo-Templarism, Hermetica, Hermetic Kabbalah, and a dozen other sources. By understanding those sources, we can understand Thelema as a living tradition, linked to all those things that are enjoying this massive revival. The Equinox material is full of references to the material above. The chemical jousting of Brother Perardua is a play on the chemical wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz, one of the core Rosicrucian texts. But the authors of the Equinox assumed that anybody interested in the esoteric had read all the Rosicrucian material, or as likely as not, been introduced to it through initiation. So, I know what you're saying. Okay, that's fine, but that's a history course, not an initiatory track. And you're right. If our intention was to teach all that material, we have something much more like the AA Studies syllabus than an actual initiatory track. So it's probably worth noting that Crowley and other 20th century Thelemites felt that the material did support initiation. But we don't revere every opinion that came out of 20th century Thelema, so why do we care? The answer is that initiation is about ourself, and that means understanding not just where we're going, but where we've come from. Initiation is the process of becoming able to attain, not just to understand our true will, but to accomplish it in full awareness. Thelemic attainment is not some vague system of apprehending the infinite or anything else. It's a set of repeatable processes which can be analyzed, improved upon, and built upon to get the desired effect. Yet it isn't an exact science. It's real, it's not spiritual mumbo-jumbo. But exactly how does it work? Well, our past, our tradition, is what informs us. It's how we know simple things like that Thelema is not about being a bunch of fascistic bullies, or that in practicing do what thou will in a way that screws over other stars in the company of stars. If one part of initiation is the development of the mechanical will to attain, another part is developing the knowledge of how and the sense of what to do with those skills once we have them. Our traditions are the guardrails which keep us from sliding into the abyss. Now, you may ask, of course, what if I have no European roots? What if I have no grounding in any of these traditions? Well, on one hand, if you feel there's a system that works better for you, that's good. On the other hand, Thelema is an open and accepting tradition meant to be promulgated, though not evangelized, to all. It's nobody's house. It's nobody's property. You are explicitly invited. I couldn't keep you out if I wanted to, and I don't. And it carries a certain set of traditions in its history. This doesn't mean you can't add more. Maybe you have the right, without cultural appropriation of material, to add your own customs or traditions to the canon of Thelema and improve its understanding and processes. The authors who are given the job of birthing this system into the living world and putting a physical shape on it have worked with the material that they have a link through their existing Thelemic tradition. Over time, it will change and evolve. So, we're not going to teach all of that material. We couldn't. What we do aim to do is create an emotional connection to the traditions behind Thelema. Why? Because, frankly, you may not feel that connection. You may know that there were people conjured using grimoires who had secret traditions, but you may not really feel that they're your people. I'm going to be frank and say that's largely because of Christianity. In particular, Protestant Christianity did a lot of scrubbing away of past traditions in order to establish its authority. By the 19th century, you had a fascination both with paganism and with Roman Catholicism, because Protestants in Northern Europe saw Roman Catholics as having maintained more authentic traditions. They themselves may have purged a lot of older traditions, but they had something. That's why the esotericists at the turn of the last century were obsessed with authenticity. Why MacGregor Mathers of the Golden Dawn and Yellow Morganug, who was responsible for a rekindling of interest in Druidism, forged documents to create a spurious past for their organizations. Why Cagliostro and the French grounded their hermetic mysteries in Egypt. In a larger extent, it's why Victorian men ran around the globe stealing traditions that weren't theirs. They talked about and wrote about feeling no real roots of their own, feeling a sterility to their homelands, especially to England, but all of Northern Europe. And so, some focused on trying to recreate pagan traditions, others became very interested in Catholicism, and still others went around, and when they saw indigenous cultures that had these deep, valuable, passionate commitments to their ancestral traditions, they did what imperialists do and took them. Not particularly successfully in a lot of cases, but in a way that left a history of very flawed interactions. So we want to form emotional connections to our past, because ideas can only matter if the connections matter. But we also don't want to go around the globe appropriating things that we don't have a basis to take. So, mainstream religion eventually stripped even Christ out of Western spirituality. That's because whatever you think of Christianity, the core message is love one another, and Christ taught poverty and overthrew the moneylenders at the temple, and that didn't support middle-class American and British businesses. So they stripped that out too. And as toxic as we may feel in a lot of cases evangelical Christians are, they do have one thing in common with us. They're rebelling against the same thing that we are. They saw this post-World War II Christianity that was very sterile, that had even the core of its ideals removed from it, and was utterly devoid of any significance or meaning, and they rebelled against that. So, unfortunately, rebellions are often suborned by leaders with their own agenda, so we have things like prosperity gospel today. There's a second reason that Thelema is somewhat cut off from its past, which is that for all practical purposes, Thelema itself died out for 20 years. There was some interest in Crowley's writing during that time, and there were people like Phyllis Seckler or Cameron who, in their own way, continued to talk about or write about Thelema in different corners. Those two people were really symbolic of two branching traditions. One in which, with Seckler, a lot of information was preserved about Thelema, but with limited reach, and another tradition which saw Crowley become an icon of Hollywood and New York literati, of English performers such as the Beatles, but without a lot of detailed knowledge of the actual corpus of Thelema. So those didn't start to come back together until the late 1960s and early 1970s. In that period, you have Lee Heflin founding Level Press. You had some other publishing of Crowley's work. And so you have this burst of creativity and a lot of work actually being republished in the 70s and early 80s. Now, I don't think anyone set out to bury Thelema under a bushel basket, but it did not transition as well into the 21st century as you might have hoped. You had a ton of by then aging publications, and most of them weren't reissued, and some of them carry very high price tags today. In some cases, the original publishers aren't around. In some cases, such as the College of Thelema, there's been a really solid effort to push older material, such as all of Phyllis's work within the Continuum, out to the public. But in other cases, there's just a lack of interest in putting older work out, even in paid Kindle editions. I think because of concerns it would be pirated. And of course, the ironic result is that it is pirated far more widely than it would have been if there had been a concerted effort between 2000 and 2010 to get PDF editions out. But the fact is, that means there's a lot of this sort of unbalanced black market in the better editions of Crowley's work. They're not as available to people who are happy to buy their books legitimately through Barnes & Noble, Lulu, whatever. And you didn't see new editions because, unlike the 1687 Sloan 2731, Crowley's work was under copyright. Now, we know Crowley wouldn't approve of his work being entombed for 70 years. He had a great deal of respect for H.P. Blavatsky, and he showed that by reprinting The Voice in the Silence. That was originally published in 1889, and only 30 years later, Crowley published it as a special supplement to the Blue Equinox, that's Volume 3, Number 1, in 1919. Unfortunately, that's over now. Thelemic literature itself is finally looking at a renaissance. Crowley's work entered the public domain in Europe and in most of the world in 2018, so while it's still an inhibition to U.S. scholars, you're already seeing things like an excellent new edition of Book 4 by Stephen Skinner available through Amazon UK. So one thing we want to do is fuse that fantastic wealth of information from the 1st century through 17th century England, 1st century Egypt through 17th century England and all of Europe, to the corpus of Thelemic material that's beginning to legitimately pour back onto the scene. And that is absolutely initiatory. The children of parents who have no values will often grow up having no values of their own. If we wish to connect with the traditions that created Thelema, because it did not miraculously explode into being fully formed in 1904, we cannot just read about them. We must emotionalize and experience them. The people of those traditions are our spiritual ancestors, and we need to get to know them and to learn from them and harness their knowledge as our guide in knowing where Thelema is going. Why is this initiation? Because we're not the writers publishing new work or rediscovering buried work. We're making a cup of tea to steep the dried leaves of the Thelemic community, to unshrivel the leaves and allow the dried husk that is all but a very small segment of Thelemic practice to steep and become rich and strong and flavorful. There are many paths to initiation. We don't need to use a used car salesman pitch of saying ours is the only one. But what has been handed to us is a generational opportunity to recreate a living tradition for Thelema, to connect it to the past, to breathe life into it, to allow it to penetrate into the minds and flesh and bones of modern Thelemites, so that they stop being ungrounded and feel a real connection with their past. To journey to the city of pyramids, we need to come from somewhere. In Crowley's original initiations, the initiates are asked to declare themselves travelers. We are all travelers on the path of initiation. To really feel a connection to the place we're going, it is helpful, maybe in many cases necessary, to understand where that road originated. The Thelemic Initiations are about the entire road, and I hope you'll join me in traveling it. For the Thalemic Order, I'm Sibling James Gordon. Love is the law, love under will.